Section 4 of Recollections of a Busy Life by William B. Forwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3 Liverpool. Liverpool occupies the unique position of having filled two important places in the history of England. There was, firstly, the little town clustered round about its castle, and holding a charter from King John, dated 1207, its estuary affording a safe haven for the trifling commerce passing between England and its sister island, Ireland. Thus situated, it had to bear its part in the political movements and the foreign and civil wars which for long years harassed and distressed the country and checked its progress. Although the 6 centuries which intervened between 1200 and 1800 are filled with many incidents which clothe this portion of the history of Liverpool with much that is picturesque and romantic, at the close of the 18th century we still find Liverpool a small if not insignificant place, with a population in 1790 of only 55,000, while the tonnage of her shipping was only 49,541 tons. This may be said to close the history of Old Liverpool. With the dawn of the 19th century a new Liverpool sprang into existence. The opening of the American trade, the Peace of 1814, and the introduction of steamships gave an enormous impetus to the growth of the trade of the port, and laid the foundations of that vast and world-wide commerce which has made the name of Liverpool synonymous with the greatest achievements in commerce and in science. The building of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, the mother of railways, the docks, and the bridging of the Atlantic by what is practically a steam ferry, will ever stand out as epoch-making. Thus, in little over 100 years, Liverpool has grown from a small town into a great city, the city of today. Liverpool in 1860 to 1870. My story must, however, begin with the 60s, when I commenced my business career. The growth of the city and its commerce has since been fully commensurate with the growth of the country. In the 50 years which have intervened the empire has doubled its area and population, and the United Kingdom has trebled its trade. The population of Liverpool, including the newly added areas, has during the same period increased from 433,000 to 750,000, and the tonnage of our shipping from 4,977,272 tons to nearly 17,000,000 tons. She conducts 1/3 of the export trade and 1/3 of the import trade of the United Kingdom, and she owns 1/3 of the shipping of the kingdom, and 1/7 of that of the world. It has been a privilege to have been engaged in the commerce of the port during this remarkable expansion, and to have been associated with the conduct of public affairs during this period of growth and development in the city. Very much of this has been due to the enterprise and enlightenment of her own people. Liverpool shipowners have been in the vanguard of steamship enterprise, which has contributed so greatly to her prosperity. Her merchants have built up her great trade in cotton and grain, and her citizens have not been slow to promote every sanitary improvement which made for the health and well-being of her people. During the past 50 years the town has been re-sewered, the streets paved with an impervious pavement, and a new water supply has been introduced. The city has been encircled by a series of public parks and recreation grounds, baths and wash-houses have been established, free libraries have been opened in the various suburban centers of population, cellar dwellings have been abolished, and rookeries in the shape of courts and tenement houses have been done away with, and in their place clean and comfortable working-men's cottages and flats have been substituted. The curse of drink has been effectively checked by the closing of 25% of the public houses. To quote from Professor Ramsay Weir's interesting "History of Liverpool," Quote, "Thus on all sides, and in many further modes, the city government has, during the last 30 years especially, undertaken a responsibility for the health and happiness of its citizens, unlike anything that its whole previous history has shown. And if any full account were to be given of what the city as a whole now endeavors to do for its citizens, much ought also to be said of the extraordinary active works of charity and religion which have been carried on during these years." Unquote. The Liverpool of today is a city very different from the Liverpool of the 60s and 70s. Indeed, it is difficult to recognize them as being one and the same. The streets remain, but they are widened and improved, and their inferior and often squalid surroundings have disappeared. And if our modern architecture is not always of the best, our new buildings at least impart dignity and importance. Shaw's Brow, with its rows of inferior, dingy shops, a low public house at the corner of each street, has given way to William Brown Street, adorned on one side by our museum, libraries, art gallery, and sessions house, and the other by St. George's Hall and St. John's Gardens. The rookeries which clustered round Stanley Street, and were occupied by dealers in old clothes and second-hand furniture, have been replaced by Victoria Street, which is margined by banks and public buildings. The terrible slums which surrounded the Sailors' Home and Customs House, veritable dens of iniquity, have disappeared. The dirty, ill-paved town is now the best paved and the best scavenged town in the United Kingdom. With the growth of the town and the extension of tramways, residential Liverpool has been pushed further out until it can get no further, and it is now finding its way into Cheshire. No private dwelling house of any importance has been erected on the Liverpool side for many years. The charming suburb of Aigburth has long since been destroyed, but the greatest change has taken place in the docks. The old docks have had to be remodeled to give sufficient depth of water and quay space for the larger vessels now employed, and special docks have had to be constructed for the Atlantic steamship trade. In the 60s the Prince's Dock was filled with sailing ships trading to India and the west coast of South America. They discharged on the west side and loaded on the east side. It was quite a common thing for a sailing vessel to occupy 4 and 5 weeks loading her outward cargo. On the walls of the docks and on the rigging of the ships, posters were displayed notifying that the well-known clipper ship such and such, A1 at Lloyd's, would sail for Calcutta or Bombay, and giving the agent's name, etc. At the south end of the Prince's Dock was the George's Basin, a tidal basin through which ships going into the Prince's or George's Dock entered. I remember seeing one of Brocklebank's Calcutta ships, the Martaban, enter this basin under sail. It was done very smartly, and the way in which the canvas was taken in and the sails clewed up and furled was a lesson in seamanship. The George's Dock was dedicated to schooners, mostly fruiterers from Lisbon or the Azores, and during the herring season fishing boats used to discharge in one corner, the fish girls going down planks to get on board to buy their fish. The Mariners' Church, an old hulk in which divine service was held every Sunday, occupied another corner. The Albert Dock was filled with East Indiamen discharging their cargoes of sugar, jute, and linseed, and tea clippers from China. They loaded their outward cargoes in the Salthouse Dock, which adjoined. Further south again, the King's and Queen's Docks were occupied by small foreign vessels, trading to the continental ports. The old New York liners, sailing ships, loaded in the Bramley Moor Dock, and the docks further north, the Canada being the most northerly, were filled with steamers trading to the Mediterranean, and the Cunard and Inman lines of steamers. Today one may hunt from one end of the docks to the other without finding a dozen sailing ships larger than a schooner. With the exit of the sailing ship, much of the romance has been taken out of the life of Liverpool. It was a joy to walk round the docks and admire the smart rig and shipshape appearance of the old sailing vessel. The owner and captain, and indeed all connected with her, became attached to their ship and took a pride in all her doings. In those days the River Mersey was a glorious sight, with probably half a dozen or more Indiamen lying to an anchor, being towed in or out, or sailing in under their own canvas. The River Mersey, at all times beautiful with its wonderful alternations of light and its brisk flowing waters, has never been so beautiful since the old sailing ship days, when at the top of high water the outward bound fleet proceeded to sea, and the entire river from the pier head to the rock light was filled with shipping of all sizes working their way out to sea, tacking and cross-tacking. The clipper with her taut spars and snow-white canvas, and the small coaster with her tanned sails, all went to make up a picture of wonderful color and infinite beauty. The Dock Board. There is no branch of the public service of which Liverpool people are more proud than the administration of the Mersey Docks and Harbour Board. The members of the board have always been recruited from our leading merchants, ship owners, and brokers, and they have been fortunate in selecting as their chairmen men of exceptional ability. I can recollect Charles Turner, M.P., Robert Rankin, William Langton, Ralph Brocklebank, T.D. Hornby, Alfred Holt, John Branker, and the board is today presided over by Mr. Robert Gladstone, who worthily maintains the best traditions of his office. Of late years the members have been elected without any contests, but it was not always so. In the 70s there were severe contests, which arose not upon questions of personal fitness, but were prompted by trade rivalries. It had become the fashion for the various trades to nominate members who would look after the particular interests of their trade. Jealousy was aroused if one trade obtained larger representation than others. The interests of the steamship owners were opposed to those of the sailing ship owner. The one wanted allotted berths to secure dispatch, the other quay space free and unappropriated. Cotton men wanted special facilities for cotton, and the timber people yard space for the storage of timber and deals. Each trade had its associations, and in addition there was a ratepayers' association, which sought to break up this system of trade delegation by electing independent men. The payment of £10 in dock dues gave a vote, so faggot votes were easily and extensively manufactured. Ship owners and merchants qualified every clerk in their employ. The nomination of members took place on the 1st of January, and the election on the day following. The elections were hotly contested, but always in a gentlemanly way, and with much good humour. It required skill to fill up the voting papers, so as to secure a majority for any particular candidate. Among those who busied themselves over these elections, I remember William Johnston, Robert Coltart, Worsley Battersby, Edmund Taylor, Arthur Forwood, G.B. Thompson, George Cunliffe, and James Barnes. The Ratepayers' Association accomplished much good by the election of some men of independence. My particular desire at this time was to try and induce the board to fund their debt. It was felt that such a large floating debt was not only cumbrous and inconvenient, but in times of financial stress, or with a cycle of years of bad trade, might be a source of danger. I urged the funding of the debt on the nomination days, and also through the press and Chamber of Commerce. It met with the strong opposition of the board, led by Mr. Brocklebank. but in course of time, after the corporation had taken the lead, the Dock Board wisely funded a portion of their debt. The gradual increase of steamers, the passing of the sailing vessel, and the large share of the trade of the port being now conducted by liners, have to a very large extent done away with trade rivalries. Hence the little interest now taken in the Dock Board elections. The present generation scarcely know that the docks were, up to 1857, administered by a committee of the corporation. In my young days Liverpool people were very sore and angry at the action of Parliament in foisting upon them the Birkenhead docks. These docks had been constructed by a private company, and were insolvent and a hopeless failure. Birkenhead had, however, powerful influence in Parliament, and stoutly opposed any extension of the Liverpool docks, contending that the Birkenhead docks had not had fair play, and could accommodate the surplus trade of Liverpool. In the end, in 1857, Liverpool was obliged to buy them for £1,143,000, and within a very few years had to expend upon them £3,859,041. This outlay has ever since been a serious burden upon Liverpool. Nor did the hostile action of Parliament stop here. The town dues were taken from Liverpool and commuted for a payment of £1,500,000. The management of the dock estate was placed in the hands of the trustees, who are, except 3, elected by the dock ratepayers. In olden time the Dock Board had an annual excursion to inspect the lightships, to which they invited the whole of the council. They were pleasant days, and it was supposed that the mayor for the coming year was selected on these occasions. These excursions contributed to a good feeling between the Dock Board and the corporation, which is so essential if we are to preserve the prosperity of the port. I sometimes think that our city fathers apparently forget that our docks and our commerce are the lifeblood of Liverpool. Mr. John Bramley Moore's great work on the Dock Board was completed before my day, but he continued his interest in Liverpool to the last, and was present at the opening of the North Dock system in 1882, where I saw him. He used to tell how indefatigably he worked to secure the extension of the docks in a northerly direction, how he asked Lord Derby to present the Bootle shore to the Dock Board, urging that it would be greatly to the gain of the Derby family. Lord Derby replied that it would be very difficult to convince him of that, and that he had already refused £90,000 for it. Mr. Bramley Moore then offered, if Lord Derby would transfer his foreshore rights, the Dock Committee would raise all the backland by using it for the deposit of their spoil, which would, he thought, be an adequate compensation. The deal was closed on this basis. The Dock Committee secured 2 miles of river frontage, and the Derby family the site of the most important part of Bootle, and now forming one of the most valuable of their estates. One of the first docks constructed on this newly acquired land was the Bramley Moor, so named after the chairman. No one can fail to acknowledge the enterprise and wisdom which have characterized the administration of the dock estate. Municipal work follows the demand of the people, and seldom goes ahead of it, but the provision of docks must anticipate the demand likely to be experienced. In all this the Dock Board has acted with boldness and with prudence, under circumstances of much embarrassment. The construction of the Manchester Ship Canal presented a problem of considerable difficulty, but the Dock Board adopted the courageous but wise policy of looking to Liverpool and Liverpool trade only, and the facilities they have provided for the changed conditions of trade have done not a little to conserve the commerce of the port. End of section 4.